I'm a born-again Christian, and on that line, my definitions come from God's word. So I believe that God is the one who gives us the definitions, and then man in his quest redefines those definitions to fit his particular lifestyle or his particular purpose or whatever it is that he wants to achieve. So putting that at the back of my mind, I look back at how God created us and how he set the model and the design and how it's supposed to be. So looking back at Adam, who was created before Eve, and this is not supposed to bring any form of contention or anything, I'm just stating the narrative. When Adam was created and put in the garden, work was already there. Yeah. So the reason why I bring up work, to me, the two most, not even three, the two most important aspects of malehood or manhood is responsibility and provision. When God put us as men, starting with Adam, there was responsibility. He was given responsibility over creation. That has transformed or has gone into everything else. The moment we start being considered as men, your father telling you you're the man of the house, what does he give you? Responsibility. You know? And provision now comes later. That is part of that responsibility. When an older man hands over their daughter and gives you, now you're responsible for one other human being, and it's up to you as the man to provide for them. Now, that's not a knock on the women that are providing. That's not what I want to discuss. I'm just saying that in God's model, responsibility, provision, and I would even add a third one, which is protection. That's the way I look at it. Topmost three, if you said responsibility, provision, and protection.
Men are getting into depression because of lost jobs right now. I know two couples who have separated because the man is unable to provide, despite the fact that he's been providing for 8 years for one of them and 3 years for the other. The wives of these men felt like there is no input from the man and decided we are better off alone. Let me go and deal with my stuff alone. Does the Bible exclusively say the man should be the sole provider?
I normally like to view things as a couple of steps back. So the reason why a man would go into depression, having provided for 8 years, as you said, then all of a sudden he loses his job and he breaks down. What that says to me, and it is something that I mentioned in the podcast, is that this man had gotten his identity from what he did. Our delusion as human beings is that since we don't want to spend time and find out where the source of our identity is, then we pick up the different things that somewhat gives us fulfillment, and we take that as the source of our identity. So if it's achievements, if it's our work, if it's our sense of fulfillment, anything that you do that will give you a sense of satisfaction, fulfillment, or anything like that, then it's very easy for you to take that as your identity. Over the last century plus, there's been a lot of women empowerment and ensuring that they get the necessary opportunities. If it's school, if it's work, and all that. And that has really put them on a growth trajectory, which by the way is a good thing. Less time. So now, I usually say this. While the girl child is growing and being empowered, there is no one who is empowering the boy child to handle this empowered girl. And by handle, I don't mean like to put down. I just mean that, okay, to be at par now and to have the conversation and contribution that is constructive and not negative. So you find if by my own insecurities that might have been caused by how I grew up, the culture that I was exposed to, I'll start feeling, if a woman provides, that makes me less of a man. I'm already threatened by her provision, even if it's well-meaning. So that becomes a conflict. Do I have a problem with women providing in this particular day and age? Quite frankly, yes. Yes. The reason being, God's model provides the man as the head of the home, which means it's his responsibility to provide. Is he able to? That's an entirely different question. Is he not able to out of circumstances or out of choice? Yeah? If the man has everything that he possibly could need to provide, but he is not, then he's going contrary to God's model. Yeah?
Okay.
So I have no problem with women providing or being the sole breadwinner in the house, as long as one, it's an agreement between the family saying, you know what, this is my situation, I don't have a job. What am I doing about that? I am applying for jobs. I am looking for jobs.
So it's not that I am sitting
Yes.
and I'm letting you
It's
provide.
not that
as well.
I am sitting and I'm letting you provide. This is the scenario. Before I can get back to being the provider, you're going to have to step in because this is your family as well. Yeah? So for this duration, you're going to have our back. You know? And to me, that's a privilege. That's a privilege because it says, and this is not talk, this is something that happened in my life. There was a time where I was not employed, my business had not kicked up, and for a period of about 8 to 9 months, close to a year, my wife was the one who had to hold the home. Now, flip side, does she take her provision as a reason to put me down?
And that is where I wanted to touch on, because the reason why the men I was telling you were undergoing depression is because they were getting pressure from the woman to go out and do something, but despite any effort I'm just speculating, despite any effort they were trying to make, they were still seen as the fact that we grew up knowing provision is important, and now my wife is telling me, if you're not providing, then what use are you in the house? So they went through depression.
Kind of a man are you?
Yes, so they went through depression because of every pressure they're getting in the home. And ultimately, when the wife said, you know what, I cannot do this anymore, let's take a break, which in marriage, there's nothing like taking a break. Let's take a break and then you go figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Now that is where they started going through depression. Not because they are unable to provide, but because the partner, like you're saying, who is supposed to step in, was demeaning them or looking down on them because of that pillar of provision that has been put on us.
Yes. Now, just because of what you just mentioned now, you see, and this might sound harsh. In that case, the problem is the woman. And by woman, I mean the person. Like that is a heart problem of that individual, not women in general. It is that individual who has a problem. And where is that problem coming from? It could be as simple as I'm comparing this man in my house to my dad. Yeah? I'm comparing him to my uncle. I'm comparing to a certain image,
Certain figure that
has fit that profile of a husband that I have in my mind. To me, that's a case of maturity of the lady now. Should women provide for such a space and a season as agreed upon by the family? Then that's good. Because we know as men and how we get joy from doing those things that we believe is part of our responsibility, there's two ways that it can happen. You can either become lazy and start saying, she's paying it, and I'm still here. Why not? Let her do it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that's God's model, and I don't believe that's an African model. I don't believe that's any form of model. It's just a laziness on our part. But if the man is doing the best that he can in terms of trying to change the scenario, then the lady ought to see the effort and talk about it. So you want a wife who goes, works, but at the same time, you want a wife who stays at home, cooks, does all these things that a traditional woman used to do, because all those other opportunities were not there during that time.
And at that time, you're only doing one part of that.
You're only doing one part of it.
You're only going to work.
Yes.
And you expect when you come home, the kids should be fed well, the house is clean.
After all, that is the woman's work.